Many people are stuck wondering why their deep sky objects look like this instead of like that. Although it's not likely that any of us are going to get deep sky images on the same tier as the Hubble telescope, we can still do our best to get close to it. In this video, I'm going to give you 4 things that you need to know to get the most detail out of your astrophotography. Many people think that astrophotography is as simple as clicking a button, taking some long exposures, stacking together, and you have your astrophotography image. However, seasoned astrophotographers know that that's not the case, although I truthfully wish it was. The first point is something more obvious. Guiding and polar alignment are crucial parts to astrophotography, mainly in regards to deep sky astrophotography. Those who are doing wide angle astrophotography don't have to worry about it as much, since they're focusing on a wider area rather than the intricate details of a smaller galaxy, for example. Polar alignment is probably the most important thing to keep in mind in astrophotography, since if you don't accurately polar align, the deep sky object that you locate, whether it be with a simple sky tracker like the Skywatcher Star Adventure 2i, or even an advanced go-to mount like the Celestron AVX or the ZW AM5, will slowly, or quickly depending on how badly you polar align, drift out of your camera's field of view. And as you scroll through your light frames the next morning, you'll regret not having taken the extra 5 minutes to make sure your polar alignment was spot on. Also, polar alignment has direct correlation with how accurate your guiding is. And if your polar alignment is bad and you attempt to guide and your guiding is about 3 or 4 arc seconds, the gradual drift each second while guiding will eventually make your deep sky image become blurry. And even if your telescope has the necessary focal length for that deep sky object, you won't get the details you potentially could had you accurately polar aligned. Point is, just don't be lazy about it. By the way, if you're interested in other videos that can help you to improve your astrophotography, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Also, if you have any suggestions or good experiences for beginners, make sure you drop it in the comments below. Your camera is not the right match for your telescope. I made the mistake for an entire year thinking that any camera would just work with any telescope. I also thought that the smaller the pixel size you have, the more details you'll be able to get on a deep sky object. And while that's slightly true, truth is, it all depends on your telescope. If you have pixels that are either too small or too big for your telescope's focal length, even at perfect focus, your image will end up looking blurry. Thankfully, the website astronomy.tools has made it easy for you to figure out if your telescope is a good match for your camera. The link to this website is in the description and it's completely free to use. All you do is type in your telescope focal length, type in your pixel size, and then scroll to the bottom to see if your telescope and camera work well together or not. The funny thing is, the things that people will often tell you, like the most important thing with astrophotography is your focal ratio, is a lie. If you want to get the most detail on your deep sky object and your guiding is perfect, your telescope and camera work perfectly together, the only other option you have is to just get a telescope with a higher focal length. Focal length is what directly impacts the amount of zoom that your telescope has on an object. And just like our human eyes cannot see the details of, for example, our skin cells without the proper magnification, our telescope camera can't see the tiny details of things like smaller galaxies and nebula, again, without the proper magnification. And by the way, the only thing focal ratio really affects is how much light is able to be gathered within a certain amount of time. And yes, exposure time can make a big difference with how much detail you're able to get out of your astrophotography image. That brings us to the 4th point, exposure time. How much time do you need? How much time is too much time? How much time is too little time? Well, first of all, there's no such thing as too much time. But how much time is too little time and how much time do you need? Well, that's going to depend on 2 things, your telescope and how bright the deep sky object is that you want to image. You see, the more exposure time you get, the more of a contrast you're able to create between the deep sky object and the night sky itself. Also, as a result of lots of exposure time, you'll likely have lots of sub-exposures, which is just your light frames, meaning that you'll have less noise to deal with, also meaning more detail. If you get 2 nights of exposure time on one deep sky object and your image is still noisy, you should double the amount of exposure time, or in other words, just get another 2 nights. Continually add exposure time until your image is noise-free and more to your liking. Astrophotography can be a really confusing hobby, but let's continue to learn together. As mentioned before, if you have any advice or suggestions for beginners, leave it in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching the video. You're watching Scott's Astrophotography, and as always, I wish you clear skies.